Hi all, if you are a returning viewer, welcome back. If you are new, welcome. My name is Amira, and today guys, we are going to be reviewing the new palette from Nomad Cosmetics, the Okavango Safari palette. Now I mentioned that I had purchased two palettes recently, one of them being the Natasha Denona Yucca palette and another palette, and this was the other palette. And as you can see, there is a definite theme going on with the color stories that have caught my eye recently. This one I saw it and I was like, this is the first Nomad palette color story that has made me want to purchase it. Like, I've seen a couple of their color stories and I was like, those are nice, but it wasn't enough to compel me to like open my wallet and order it. And so this is the first Nomad palette that I've ever tried and that I've ever purchased. The color story is absolutely stunning. I'll show you guys here. Absolutely beautiful, and as you can see, very much in line with what's really popular right now, especially with the release of the new Natasha Denona palette, which I reviewed in my last video. So I'm going to do a look with this palette, but then I'm also going to pull out some comparison palettes, because between this one and the Yucca palette, I feel like we're kind of getting into this territory with these type of colors and color stories that is harkening back to another time. And so I'm going to pull out some of my older palettes and you guys tell me what you think about how close they are and how much of sort of a renaissance of a certain color palette we are experiencing. Let's get into it. All right guys, so I have zoomed you in. My makeup is done. I put on my, my regular face products. I am wearing a lipstick from Propa Beauty. I think this is called Audacious, but if not, I'll put the correct name in the description box. And I've done my base and my bronzer and blush and eyebrows and all of that good stuff. And I've primed my eyes. So again, I'm sitting down and flying by the seat of my pants here. I have no idea what I really want to do with this palette. I've never used this formula before, so this is definitely a first impression for me, which you guys know I don't generally like to do, but we're gonna go for it. I think I am going to go in with the Moremi Game Preserve color here because it's so beautiful and it's calling my name, and I'm just gonna apply that to my lid. I have swatched the shimmers in this palette, but I have not swatched the mattes. So I am going in blind with how those feel. This is applying very nicely. It's a very soft color, which I'm fine with, but it is showing up because these type of shades sometimes don't show up on my skin because of my undertone. My undertone has quite a bit of yellow in it. So oftentimes shades that have like a yellow base won't show up on me very well. Unless I help it out with like a liquid shadow that acts as like eyeshadow base that is of the same color, and it kind of helps me like build it up. And that's just, if you experience that issue where a color you really want to show up on your skin doesn't, try using a liquid shadow of the same tone or similar tone as your base and then applying the powder shadow over it, and it usually will help make that color more true because you've got something that's like a barrier between your skin and the shade itself. So just a little tip, just a little something to think about. All right, so to apply that's applied beautifully. I think now I kind of want to go in with either, I'm either going to go in with Elusive Leopards or Pack of Wild Dogs. They're both neutrals. This is Elusive Leopards and that's Pack of Wild Dogs. And you can see this has very much a yellow base. I think I'm going to go in with this one because I do want a bit of contrast. And I think those two shades together might just kind of blend into nothing. So I'm going to go in, and I'm going to use the same brush. Yeah, why not? I'm going to wipe it off. And I'm using a Sonia G Blender Pro for this. I'm going to go in with Pack of Wild Dogs. And I generally like to use my natural hair brushes when I'm trying a eyeshadow formula for the first time, because it just kind of makes me feel a bit more secure, and I feel like I kind of know how the shadows will perform with a natural hairbrush. Like, I know I'll definitely be able to pick up product, blend product, you know, that type of thing. All right, that's really pretty. And as I'm doing this, I'm actually thinking of a look that I want to do with this palette. Because I was like, what shades do I want to use? Because there's a lot more options in this palette than in, well, I guess it's about the same, but I feel like there are. Okay, so that has been blended out on either side. I'm very happy with how that looks. I think, what shimmer do I want to use? So I've got two options. I think Mighty Buffaloes might not have enough contrast to it. I think that'll look too samey. So I'm thinking I'm either going to use Leaping Lecheways, I think this is called. It's beautiful, like, or this shade that's kind of like swirly, and this is Roaring Lions. I'm about to draw up the palette. I think we're gonna use Roaring Lions, so let's go in with that one. And I've adjusted my colors a little bit with my lighting. I try to keep my lighting like on the same settings, and I accidentally touched it when I was breaking my like filming equipment down. So forgive me, but yeah, I was like, I'm touching the wrong thing, and I couldn't remember like where it was placed. So that's fun. All right, so let's go in with Roaring Lions, and I'm using my Refer 21 per use. And I'm going to see how this applies with me just applying it and not putting anything on my brush or any kind of glitter glue or anything. And I just want to see how this goes on. Because I will say, when I swatched these, and like I said, I swatched all of the metallic shades because I was just curious how they would feel. They felt a bit thin to me, especially coming off of the Yucca palette, which had, I feel like the metallics in that has such dimension and they had such body to them. These felt quite thin in comparison, so I was a little bit worried. But this is applying absolutely beautifully. So, you know, maybe it's just they don't swatch as well, which is fine. I mean, that's kind of how I feel about certain brands that I love. I don't feel like they swatch as well as they apply on the eye, but that's fine because that's what I'm using the palette for, to apply it on my eye, you know? This is beautiful. All right, perfect. So now I'm gonna go back in with the, what's this called? The Hunking Hippos, that dark brown, and I just wanna kind of like apply that to make sure this is properly blended together. Beautiful, beautiful. And then for the lower lash line, I'm thinking I want to stay neutral, but I might want to use like this shade here, which is called Keystone Termites, and it's like this beautiful, like almost cool toned taupey gold. It's very interesting. Or maybe I'll put that in my inner corner. I might put that in my inner corner. That's so pretty. But yeah, I think, do I want to do green on my lower lash line? I kind of want to keep this neutral, which I know is boring, but I kind of want to, you know what? I will use the green, but I'm going to use this really dark green. I'm going to use this one that's called Rumbling Elephants. It looks, I'm going to pull it back a little bit so it gets, so you guys can see how concentrated. So this is the dark brown, and this one is like a deep, deep dark green, almost like a blackened green. So I think I'm going to use that. And I am using one of my Kyoto pencil brushes, and I'm just dipping into that, and I'm going to apply that to the lower outer portion of my lid. I'm not taking this all the way in because I want to put another color in there. That was done. That was easy peasy. Okay, now I'm going to take, I think I'm going to take Chief's Island, or do I want to take Pack of Wild Dogs again? Actually, we're going to take Clash of Rhinos, which is this shade here. One thing I will say is I'm applying these to my eyes. These shades are quite powdery. I don't even know if you can see how much powder is coming off my brushes. I'm like blending this in, like it's literally just like, so these are quite powdery shades. That's actually quite pretty. All right, I'm now gonna take that shade Keystone Termites, and I am going to wet my brush just so I can avoid some fallout. And put that in my inner corner. Oh, that's so pretty, and it definitely has like a sort of green tinge to it, which I really like. That's really pretty. Okay, so I'm taking Leaping Lecheways and I'm gonna apply that to my lower lash line, just a little bit over that matte. And I absolutely love applying metallics on my lower lash line. I just think it gives the eyes such a pop. Like so. That is really pretty. Okay, I'm going to apply some mascara off camera. I'm going to use this L'Oreal Paris Voluminous Brown Balm Mascara. I used this in my video that I filmed for the Yucca palette review, and I'm still deciding how I feel about this. I wore it the next day as well because I just want to get use out of it so I can tell you guys what I think of it. But yeah, I'll be back. Guys, I am back. I have applied mascara and I also applied some eye pencil in my waterline. I used this yellow pencil from ColourPop. It is one of their cream gel liners in the shade Punch. So it's like it's a little bit lighter than the actual like component. The component is like a mustardy yellow. It looks brighter on camera, but it is a mustard yellow. And the tone of the liner is like a tad lighter than that, but I thought that would be a nice pop with what I have on my eyes, the colors that I chose. So just to give you my, my first impression, my first thoughts on this palette, I'm actually really impressed with the mattes. I was really quite impressed by how easily and quickly they blended. I didn't spend a lot of time blending with this. Now again, I did use natural hair brushes, which helps with that. It just does. But I think this is a really lovely matte formula. The metallics, like I said, they swatched thinly, but they didn't apply. I didn't feel like it took me a lot to get the color, the actual shadow on my eyes. I used a flat Rephr 21 brush. I didn't apply any, anything to the brush. I didn't apply setting spray or glitter glue. I did apply setting spray in my inner corner, but that was mostly just to avoid fallout. But I didn't, and I wet down here as well, and that was just to, again, avoid fallout. But the actual intensity of the shadows, I think, is there without me having to do a whole lot. So that's nice. But I will say, just from swatching them, and and sort of feeling them on my fingers, they are quite hard pressed and thin, but it does pick up on a brush, so that's good to know. Of course, I'm going to continue to play with this and try other shades in the palette, and I know I didn't do such a really wild look with the greens and things, but I don't know, I was just feeling this, I was really, especially with this lip, I was just feeling like a really coppery brown neutral glam kind of eye. So that's what I went with what I felt in my heart. That's what I was feeling, so that's what I did. And I'm quite happy with the look. Now, let's get into the comparisons, because I promised you guys comparisons, and I have quite a few, more than I even realized. As I was thinking about it and I was going through my collection, it's oh my goodness, this is a color story that I have purchased quite a bit because it's a color story that I love. I love murky greens and grungy yellows, mustardy yellows. That is my happy place as far as those types of colors and tones. If I'm gonna reach for a yellow, it's probably gonna be a mustard. If I'm gonna reach for a green, even though green is my favorite color, and I tend to like very vibrant, rich greens, like emerald green and forest green and hunter green, those kind of rich greens, I tend to go for those when it comes to clothing or decor and things like that. When it comes to shadows, I am all about the grungy yellow, dusty, dirty looking greens. Those make me so happy. So I realized I actually own quite a few palettes, this sort of hit these notes. So I will say the green in this one is actually quite vibrant, and I like that they put something so bright and vibrant in here when you have this like murky lime and then these sort of yellow toned, you know, mattes in here. I think that was really smart to put something that kind of just like pulls the eye a little bit. Otherwise I think this would have been kind of a boring palette without that. If I cover that up, it's kind of like meh, but as soon as you add that, it just gives so much, you know. So Okavango, let's compare it to Yucca because it's sitting right here. So here is Okavango, here is Yucca. So as you can see, they both have those pops of green, but as you can see, the greens are very different. Like this one here is far more cool toned and has more teal in it, whereas this one is more of a true green, more of a, you know, a bright, vibrant sort of, you know, grass green is what I would call that, which makes sense for a palette that's for the Okavango. And this one is the Yucca, and I like that this one is a bit more, it's almost more deserty in tone, you know. It's got those notes that are a little bit desaturated almost, you know what I mean? Like it has that sort of like if you are in a desert and you saw some yucca plants or some, you know, some other plants, they would be a little bit like the tones would be yellower and more muted. And this one I think is beautiful because you can see what the inspiration is. It's natural, but you know, grass, the Okavango gets grass. They have grass sometimes, and it gets, you know, when it rains and everything gets lush and green. So I think this is actually quite lovely as far as the way that they composed it. So let's compare it to the first palette I thought of when I saw the Okavango palette, and I was like, I wonder how close those are. I really do. And that is the other palette that has a safari theme, which is the iconic Colored Rain Safari Rain palette. Do you guys, I mean, so let's look at these together. So one thing you will realize right away is that this one has far more rich oranges, like these top two shades. The goldenness is just throwing the camera off so bad. I'm sorry guys. I'm going to do it like this. Hold on. I'm going to hold it like this, and hopefully that will that will keep it from blinding you. I'm sorry. Okay. So one thing you will notice with this is that it's got, you know, these really vibrant oranges in the corner with the golds, and then it has those greens, and then it has that rich, vibrant, true gold, and then it has this sort of cool tone taupey shade of brown, and then again a more tealy green, which is very much in keeping with, hold please while I open it back up. So many palettes. The Yucca palette, do you see that? The Yucca just doesn't have those oranges, but it has a lot of these tones in it, and it's missing that true taupe, but it does have this shade Elysian that kind of reads like a taupe in the pan, this one right here, but it's not actually taupe, whereas this one here from the Amazon Basin shade, this reads as a true taupe. So I will say that the metallics in this Coloring makes beautiful. I know that their formulas change, and I haven't tried their new formula, but their old formula, their metallics are absolutely stunning. But they're true metallics, whereas I feel like the tones in the Yucca palette are a bit, the metallics are a bit like weightier. Some of them have a little bit of shift to them. So this one is a more traditional metallic, as are the ones in the Okavango palette. So the Okavango, and I'll show you what I mean by the tones here. They are slightly different, but kind of the same. So these are the cool tone shimmers that are in the Okavango palette. And these are the shades Keystone Termites and Migrating Zebras, which is that swirly, like white and silvery looking shade. This is what you get when you touch that. So you kind of get something that's sort of in between the two of these. This one's a bit warmer, but you have this one that's cool. So this one, I feel like these two kind of take the place of this shade that is in the Safari Rain palette. On to the next comparison is the Subculture palette, which someone in my comments mentioned under my in my Yucca palette review that that palette reminded them so much of Subculture, which I still own, guys. So I don't have the OG one, the one that everybody hated. I got the like reformulated one. So this is what that looks like, and let me show you what the Okavango looks like in comparison, and then we'll also hold up Yucca so you guys can see. So this is Okavango and this is Subculture. Okay, so let's look at Yucca with this. Okay, so I see what the comparison, I can see where you would find that the comparison is there. For me, personally, I feel like this is just different enough. Just different, like I see where the comparisons are coming from, but I also feel like this one has tones in it and shades in it that are a little bit more cold. Like these are quite, they're desaturated, but they're not cool. I wouldn't necessarily call them cool tone shades. You know what I mean? This one, I feel like you've got this like weird gray, this really desaturated green that when I apply it almost goes gray on my skin. When you swatch it, it doesn't look that gray, but you see how like cool these are in comparison to the tones that are in here. So I get the comparison. I would just say, and this is upside down, so sorry for that. I would just say that I think this one is a bit richer in tone and cooler in tone. And it's closer to Yucca than it is to Okavango, I would say. All right, next comparison is a palette that I didn't think of until I saw Angelica mention it, and I was like, oh yeah, the Juvia's Place Nomad palette, which I own. Look at that. Now, this one I would say is probably the closest to the Yucca palette than the and I've gotten stuff all over my Yucca palette. It's closer to the Yucca palette than it is Okavango in my opinion. And you can see this here. Those yellows, it doesn't have a, well it does. This color here is actually a really desaturated, muted, dusky green. Like it's like almost gray in tone. And it's, I love this shade. It's so beautiful. Let me swatch it for you guys so you can see. So you see what I mean? Like it's, in the pan it looks almost gray, but it's like this really desaturated green, which these greens in this, in the Yucca palette are far more rich in tone, like warmer in tone. You've got these really beautiful yellows. You've got a shade like Acacia, and then this shade here from the Nomad. These two, you see how different they are. So this is the one from the Yucca palette, but this is the one from the Juvia's Place palette, and it's far more deep in tone than the one from the Yucca palette. Both have a brown. I would say the brown in the Nomad palette is much warmer, as you can see. So this is the brown, and then look at that brown, very much warmer. I feel like, I don't think of this palette as a cool tone palette until I hold it up against something like this palette, which I didn't think of this palette as being very warm until I put it up against this palette, and I'm like, oh, actually, that's actually quite warm. I will say the metallics in this are similar to the Okavango palette, which I will hold up, and that they're like these like very sort of like, there's no tones like this in the Yucca palette. So let's hold it up to the Okavango and we will see how that looks. So I feel these are actually far more similar in tone than it is to the Yucca. And you can see what I mean, like they both have these really warm browns. This shade here is kind of similar. Let me wipe my fingers off. I've got eyeshadow all over my hands. I'm swatching. Let's swatch this shade here, which is Crashing Rhinos. And let's swatch this shade here, which is the one I just had. So you can see this is the Okavango Crashing Rhinos, and this is the Juvia's Place, and it's still warmer. It's still warmer. So I feel like this palette is actually incredibly warm, minus these two shades here, which feel very cool toned. The rest of this palette is really warm, and it actually reads warmer than this one. But they both have those like rich orange browns, and they both have those sort of like interesting metallics. So let's look at this metallic here called Mighty Buffaloes, and I'm going to swatch it against the one that's in the Nomad palette because I'm very curious. And the Nomad palette I don't think has names for the shades, so we're going to see. gonna swatch it with that one, and then swipe this finger off, this one. So these two on either end, this one and this one, are both from the Nomad palette. The one in the middle is the shade from the Okavango. So do you see, like, there's differences, but they're subtle, but I wouldn't say they're subtle, but they're all kind of in the same family, specifically these two. You can get a similar vibe. Like, I think you could probably take this shade from Nomad and apply this gold over it and kind of get the same vibe as you would from the one from the Okavango. And I'm actually gonna just apply that over. Yep, look at that. So this is this shade and that dark shade, and I just applied that over, just layered them, and you kind of get a similar vibe. Now let's look at another palette that I own that I thought of as I was like, oh yeah, I don't use this one as much as I used to, and I actually really do love this color story. I need to bust this out more, but this is the Melt. A lot of people didn't like this palette. I didn't have any issues with it, and I've kept it in my collection because I really love the color story. So this is the Melt 420 palette. Very vibrant, same, you know, variations on a theme here, people. So here is Melt, here is Okavango, and as you can see, this one is far more vibrant and leaning in. Oh wow, that really like blew my face out. This is far more vibrant and leaning towards that really heavy yellow element, that acidy green yellow element. Let's compare it to Yucca and see what we get. Yucca, and I actually think that the 420 is far more similar to the Yucca palette than it is to Okavango because of the yellow tones, the warmer yellow tones in the mattes. And this one only has actually one shimmer, and it's this one here, and I don't have anything that's similar to that in this one. I do think there's a shade that's like, you can say that this shade is kind of similar in the Yucca, in the Okavango palette, but it's not. This one is like a true gold. But I'm saying if you're looking for that like true gold, that's probably the best bet. You also have this shade here called Ray, and this is the shade Shatter. So, but you can see Shatter is still much warmer and much more of a like a true gold than Ray is. You do have these other shades in here, like you have Citrine. Let's swatch that, and Faded, and let's see here. Two shades from the Yucca palette. This is Citrine and Acacia on these two fingers, and then these are the shades Shotgun and Faded from the 420 palette. And do you see how similar these look? They don't actually look that similar on the eye. I haven't used this palette. In lighting, they look quite similar, but as you can see in the pan, they don't. So this finger corresponds here, and this finger, and can you see the difference now when you hold them up to the, they actually do look different on the eye. So that's one thing to think about. And then these are the two from the Yucca palette. So now let's see what we can find that's similar in the Okavango. So in the Okavango, really the only shade that really kind of hits that note is the shade Vonbura Plains. So let's swatch that one, and then let's swatch the shades from the 420 palette, because I don't feel like there's a shade in the Yucca that really hits that note. So look at that. So this is the one from Okavango, and these are the two from 420. And do you see how similar they are? I love all of these shades. They're so stunning. Oh, so pretty. But yeah, these are very similar. But again, I think the overall color story is different. So if you have the 420, if you're someone who has the 420 and you want the Yucca palette, if you're going to get the Yucca palette, I would say get it for the metallics, which are fantastic in this palette. These metallics are insane. There's some, I think these are her best metallics, the best metallics that Natasha has ever done in a palette that I've owned. And I own a fair amount of her palettes, but these are the best metallics that I've ever experienced from her brand. Get it for that, because if you have the 420 and you have the mattes, you know, you have all these mattes, I don't think you would need to get Yucca for the mattes, you know, unless you're not happy with the way those mattes perform, because I know that palette is quite controversial and some people really hate it. I like it, I got along with it, but I know that that's a palette that a lot of people struggled with. So if you have it and you like the colors but you hate the way the colors perform, the Yucca might be a good option. Finally, guys, we have the infamous Juvia's Place Tri palette. Look at that. I was like, I have to see how close this is, because I feel like this is actually quite close to both Yucca and the Okavango, but in different ways. So Okavango, try not to blind you again, and Tribe. I mean, you're not going to see my face here, but I mean, I see a lot of similarities here, you know, as far as the greens go. Again, a really vibrant, almost grassy green, and then like a really acidy green yellow. And then with the Yucca palette, you have a matte orange and a matte orange. Hold on a second here. Try to do this with minimal like damage to the palettes here. So you've got that, you know, that sort of muted toned tealy matte, you know, which you have in here with her cream to powder, which is a matte formula. Then you have that kind of like yellow, dirty toned like matte on this side here. You've got that here. You've got these beautiful orange. You've got an orange matte and an orange metallic, which this one is a orange matte. And this one reads orange on the skin. Like when you look at it, it doesn't look as well, from this angle it does. But when you look at it straight on, it doesn't look quite that orange. But you have this tone, and then you have this tone here, which is orange from the Yucca palette. But then you have these two here as well. And then you also have, I'm sorry, these two here. And then you also have traditional gold, which this one in the middle actually is. It looks orange on camera, but it's actually a gold. And I'll swatch it so you can see what I mean. So as you can see, that is a gold. So I was actually surprised at how similar Yucca is to Tribe. So again, if you have Tribe, or you're interested in the Yucca, but you don't want to spend $69 on, you know, that palette, the Juvia's Place, I don't know if Tribe is still in stock. I think Nomad is, but they are far more affordable, and Juvia's Place is always having sales. So those are far more affordable palettes than the Yucca palette, and even the Okavango palette. The Okavango, this is a $42 palette. I paid $42 for this. So this one's $69. So these are both like mid-range priced palettes, you know. And if you're not interested in doing that, if you can get your hands on both of these, you basically have both color stories, and you can buy both of these and it would be less than both of those palettes. Like you can buy these and it'd be less than the Okavango. You can buy these and it'd be less than the Yucca palette. So I just wanted to give you guys some perspective, you know. I reviewed 2 new palettes in my collection, but I know that this is a color story that is very popular, that we all, you know, well, not all, but a lot of people love, like I do. And we oftentimes can purchase the same things over and over again, not realizing it, because those are things that we're attracted to. I don't regret owning any of these. I don't regret buying Okavango. I don't regret buying Yucca. I like the fact that I've gotten to try the Nomad formula for the first time. And with Natasha, I love this color story, and I love the formulations in this palette. So for me, it was absolutely worth it to purchase both. But if you are someone who doesn't review makeup, you know, who isn't on YouTube or, you know, Instagram or anything reviewing makeup, and you just want one of these palettes or 2, and you want both color stories, maybe see if you can get your hands on these. Or if you already have, you know, Subculture and, you know, Safari Rain and, you know, 420, you have these color stories. So I just wanted to do this review, but I also wanted to just bring a bit of perspective to it as well, so that can give you guys some ideas, because I'm sure there are other palettes out there that have a similar color story as well, and you may own one of those. So I just wanted to give some perspective, some inspiration, dig through your collection and see if you have something similar. And even if you don't, then I think I can recommend the Okavango palette based off of just this first impression. You know, I can't give you like a full review, but this first impression, I've enjoyed the shades and the formulation and the application. I had, you know, I didn't have struggle with anything. It applied so seamlessly and easily, and I absolutely adore the Yucca palette. So if you are interested, if you are wanting to treat yourself, I say go ahead and do so, and those are great palettes. But if you're trying to save your coin, if you're trying to save your money, maybe look into the Juvia's Place ones. All right, guys, so that is everything. That was quite the little journey we went on there, but I was adamant about doing that because I really wanted to sort of show you guys how many palettes are out there with very similar, this very popular type of color story. If you enjoyed today's video, please be sure to hit the like button, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye now.